Okay, this video is a book review of the book called Ben-Hur. It's also a movie review for the movie Ben-Hur. This is one of the unusual situations where the movie is actually better than the book. The movie's about 3 hours long, but it's a great movie. The book is about 20 hours long of audiobooks on 19 audio CDs. And the bizarre thing about it is the first 5 audio CDs were painfully boring. Lew Wallace, who's the author, he had written a previous book about the 3 wise men who went to visit Christ at the time of his birth. And the beginning of Ben-Hur was really sort of like he put that book into being the introduction. And man, was it boring. The only reason why I put up with it was I'm sitting in the car driving. I got nothing else to do. I figure this is a very famous book. I'm going to give it a chance. But it was like literally 5 CDs of boredom before it started to get good. I couldn't believe that he did that. You could get away with long, sort of purple prose, Victorian prose, Faulkner prose, descriptive stuff in the 1800s because people had nothing else to do. No radio, no TV, no internet. But man, I was amazed at how popular this book was. It was the most popular book in the United States in the 1800s, and it was actually the most popular book in the USA up until 1936 when Gone with the Wind came along. And it's a good book. The author is a little bit of a strange bird. I mean, he is from Indiana. His name is Lew Wallace, and he was a lawyer by trade, largely self-educated. He was the youngest Union Civil War Major General. He's only 34 years old when they made him a Major General. And he was very brave. He was very gung-ho Union General. One of the strange things, though, is he was sort of appointed based on his competence to be a general. And there were a lot of West Point generals who resented him. They kind of hated him, and that's going to affect his life later on. Some people even said this book was so popular in the United States that it became equivalent to being like a fifth gospel. Okay, and that kind of surprised me. It's not as religious a book as all that stuff would imply. And as a matter of fact, Ben-Hur, the lead character, reminds me a lot of Lew Wallace. Not a surprise there. The other thing is he would do some weird things while he's writing the book. He's telling you this ancient story that happened during the time of the life of Christ, and he would occasionally sort of pierce the veil of verisimilitude by making asides directly contemporary to the reader, which was a little bit bizarre. And I think part of that came from the fact this is a self-educated guy who just did whatever felt right to him at the moment. He wasn't sort of a formally styled author. He was not your typical literary man. And sort of where does the story come from? They talk about all the stuff about being like a fifth gospel and, quasi-religious. But in reality, this really reminded me of a Roman version of the Count of Monte Cristo, sort of a revenge story. And what was the point of revenge? Ben-Hur had been unfairly accused of killing a Roman leader, sort of governor of his area. And something similar had happened in the life of Lew Wallace. He was a Civil War general on the side of the Union, and there was a big battle at Shiloh. And there had been a miscommunication leading up to the battle between General Lew Wallace and the head commanding general, Ulysses S. Grant. And, there was a miscommunication. It was sort of a verbal order. It didn't get correctly transmitted, and Lew Wallace went to the wrong place. The Union, had lost tons of men at Shiloh. They had 13,000 casualties, which is an extraordinary large number of men if you try to put that into proportional terms for the modern USA population, okay? There weren't that many people in the USA back in those days, so to lose 13,000 guys at one battle was a big, big, big deal. And there sort of was this push for accountability, and General Grant put the blame on Lew Wallace for screwing things up. And Lew Wallace was pissed off. He was a very brave, gung-ho guy, and he had followed the orders at the best that he could. But the shame of it, the stench of it was upon him. And all the West Point generals ganged up on him. They were jealous of him. They hated him. And in the book, the Romans are portrayed as the evil scumbags. And it's sort of like the equivalent of the West Point generals in the mind of Lew Wallace based on how the story plays out. It's interesting. The state of Indiana is very proud of Lew Wallace as a heroic figure. And what it reminds me of is the ancient Romans, Thucydides. Thucydides had been an admiral in the Athenian army, and he had, according to the higher-ups in Athens at that time, screwed up his military assignment, and he was banished for a while. And during that time, he wrote a book about the Peloponnesian War, and it was a masterpiece. And he stated such. He said, this book has not been written to be popular for its time, but to be a masterpiece of all time that tells men the truth about war and what happens. And it was a masterpiece. I read that when I was a freshman in college. It was fantastic as part of my History of Western Civilization course at Stanford. Lew Wallace had, in a sense, he was in exile. He was in exile of the Union Army, after he'd been slandered by General Grant. And like I said, Thucydides was in exile of the ancient Greek Athenian army. So men who are in exile, they have time to think and they're pissed off, and they often write great books. And in a sense, what Lew Wallace was trying to do, as Thucydides was trying to do, as Ben-Hur was trying to do, was to redeem themselves by putting it into a book. He sent a copy of it to the big honcho Perez Garfield of that time. And the guy loved it. He loved it so much that he afterwards made Lew Wallace governor of New Mexico. Part of where this came from as well was after the Civil War, Lew Wallace was going to a reunion of the Union soldiers, and he was riding on a train, a long train ride, and he had a prolonged conversation with Robert Ingersoll. Robert Ingersoll was sort of the most famous atheist of the 1800s, kind of like what Richard Dawkins is today. Okay, and Robert Ingersoll is full of BS, and he uses all kinds of sophistry to make Christian arguments against Christianity, if you will. But be that as it may, during his conversation with Lew Wallace was embarrassed by his theological ignorance. And that conversational embarrassment motivated him to study the Bible and Christianity in much more detail. And he became a devout Christian after that. By the way, if you're interested in Christian apologetics, the best book by far, I've read a whole bunch of them, is The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. It's available both as an audiobook, as a DVD, and as a paperback book. It's a masterpiece, and it's real concise, quick, fast, easy to read, entertaining, good, well done, true. Okay, Ben-Hur, like Lew Wallace, was unfairly accused of bad behavior and was punished. He was punished much worse than Lew Wallace was. Ben-Hur was forced to be a Galilee. I'm going to show you tons of pictures of all this. I'm giving you the backstory first before you see the picture, so everything will make sense and you'll get the deeper meaning of it. Ben-Hur struggled to redeem himself, to defeat his enemy Messala. He was the leader of the Romans against whom Ben-Hur fought. And in a sense, symbolically, that would be General Grant for Lew Wallace. And Ben-Hur was also struggling to find his family, to find his mother and his sister, who had been imprisoned at the time he was falsely accused as well for fighting against the Romans. The fact that Lew Wallace is a general, too much of the book, in my opinion, is about fighting and revenge. Like I said, it's the Roman version of the Count of Monte Cristo, sort of a revenge book. I would have preferred it if it was more of a theologic book. Like I preferred Quo Vadis, the story of the early Roman Christians versus the regular ancient Romans. That was a masterpiece of a book, one of the greatest novels of all time. Ben-Hur is a very good book, but it's not one of the greatest books of all time. It's just that 5 hours of boredom before it gets good was just too much. The theology in it's a little bit weak, Iris is the Egyptian lady who was the daughter of Balthazar in the book, and she was sort of the evil woman. She tricked Ben-Hur into falling in love with her, and then she betrayed him. The good girl was Esther. Esther was the good girl, and she eventually became his wife. As far as I was concerned for Ben-Hur, everybody will tell you that the chariot scene was the best part of the movie, and it was incredible. Just like in this picture here with Charlton Heston. It was incredible, the chariot scene, especially when you consider that movie was made in 1959. But my favorite part of the movie was the healing of the lepers. Okay, I've read a lot about Christianity, about Christian healing, Christian psychology and stuff. And Lew Wallace, man, he just wrote it perfect. The psychology of Ben-Hur's mother and sister who had gotten leprosy and how Christ healed them, and the way the whole scene was done. It was just magnificent in the book. It was magnificent. It was a masterpiece scene. I will always remember that the rest of my life. It was that good. Okay, I'm just going to show you now pictures from the movie and related pictures. So here's the movie starting out with the three wise men, the three kings. They see the star, and that's guiding them to where Christ was born to visit baby Jesus, okay? And the name of the book, Ben-Hur, its subtitle is A Tale of the Christ. And then, look, they even put by General Lew Wallace. Okay, this wasn't written by a regular guy. This was written by a military general. All right, he was also a lawyer. So he does have a rather sophisticated way of thinking, but it's very much kind of like lawyers think. Lawyers are much more aggressive and in your face and kind of nasty and vengeful and spiteful and uppity in comparison like with doctors, like what I'm used to, intellectual conversations. Okay, so here are the childhood friends. This is Charlton Heston, who is Ben-Hur in the movie, and this is Messala, his childhood friend who later on becomes a Roman tribune, and they have to fight each other in the chariot race. And Messala betrayed Ben-Hur in a very nasty way. Okay, here is Messala visiting the home of Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur is a prince. That is his mother Miriam. That is his sister Tirzah. His father had been a great man, and Ben-Hur himself was a great man. And here's the scene that started it all. Accidentally, Ben-Hur and his sister Tirzah were watching the Romans parade by. There was a new governor of their district coming in, and they accidentally dislodged some tiles from their rooftop. And these tiles fell down and they struck the horse of the Roman leader, and the horse kicked up. He fell off the horse. He was injured, almost killed. And because of that, they threw Ben-Hur in jail, made him be a galley slave for years. And they also imprisoned his sister and his mother. They took away all the family's wealth. Rather brutal revenge to make an example out of them done by the Romans. Ben-Hur was forced to become a galley slave. So this is the boat where he is a galley slave. Almost all galley slaves would typically be dead within a year or two. Ben-Hur survived it for 3 years. Here he is, Charlton Heston. And Charlton Heston is the greatest actor of all time from the United States. There's been other great ones. Mel Gibson, magnificent actor, okay? Other ones, Sylvester Stallone, the best action hero ever in, USA movies. Gosh, who else? There's been a lot of great ones. My favorite 3 comedy actors would be Rodney Dangerfield, Bill Murray, and actually I loved Chris Farley and Tommy Boy, and Eddie Murphy was fantastic as well. But anyways, Charlton Heston is, I think, the all-time best United States actor ever. He's in so many great movies. He was in 10 Commandments, another magnificent epic, and he was in other great movies too. Okay, here is the Consul Varus, another tribune, Roman tribune, and he was the captain of the boat, the captain of the whole Navy, and he became friends with Ben-Hur. He recognized that Ben-Hur was a good, smart man and noble and had been unfairly accused, and he liked Ben-Hur. So he didn't chain Ben-Hur's foot to the boat, unlike the other galley slaves were chained to the boat. So what happened then was they had to fight some pirates, and the pirates set their boat on fire, and the boat sunk, and all the galley slaves were drowned except for Ben-Hur, who was able to get out because he's the only one who wasn't chained to the boat. And then Ben-Hur saved the life of that tribune who had not had him chained to the boat. And they sat on a raft for a couple of days, and then they eventually saw the rest of the Roman fleet. And so now he had saved the admiral of the whole Roman fleet. And so this admiral didn't have any children. His own son had died, so he adopted Ben-Hur. And so Ben-Hur now has a Roman name, a Roman patrimony, and a wealthy, stepfather, okay? Adopted father. And so he travels back with him. And now the admiral has a great victory parade in Rome, and Ben-Hur is now his adopted son. Ben-Hur's own father had died. And the pageantry of Rome is extraordinary. It's just magnificent. Rome, it had been said in the book Quo Vadis, brought man's idea of ultimate power into the world, whereas the ancient Greeks had, celebrated the mind and thought and philosophy and theater and literature and all this great stuff. It was Rome that brought power into the world. And Quo Vadis also said it is Christianity that brought love and forgiveness into the world on a big scale, and that is all true. Okay, but these movies from the 1950s with the pageantry of these epics were extraordinary, just like, 10 Commandments by Cecil DeMille was another magnificent movie. That one starring Charlton Heston as well. And I remember, I went to college out in California, and we used to have to play football against USC, University of Southern California. They were called the Trojans, but they really had like a Roman element to them. And you really got this sort of sense with their uniforms and all their mascots and stuff, and the sort of the glory and the pomp and the circumstance of it. So this is the beginning of the chariot race. Here is, another view of the magnificent Circus Maximus for the great chariot race. And in this chariot race, Ben-Hur is competing against Messala, his nemesis from the Romans. And here is Messala. And Messala not only has the best horses in Rome, he's got sharp metal spikes coming out of his wheel to tear up the wheels of the other chariot drivers. And he's sort of a ruthless guy, no scruples, no morals, brutal. And he destroys the chariots of several other competitors. Ben-Hur, of course, doesn't have that, but he's got some extraordinarily good horses. And, of course, he's competing head-to-head with Messala, trying to stay ahead of him, stay away from him. And in the frenzy, Messala falls from his chariot, and then he's stomped on by horses. This is his Roman opponent, so he will suffer terribly from that. So, in a sense, Ben-Hur won the race, and also Messala was injured, and this was, in Ben-Hur's opinion, God's retribution for the evil Messala had done against him and his family. That chariot scene was extraordinary. It's like, you're like, how did they film it? It was so incredible, and it was the most exciting part of the movie. And here they are going to see Christ speaking on, I'm not sure the name of this mount, but all the people are going to see Christ, and this is especially a big deal to Ben-Hur's sister and his mother, who both had leprosy. Here's a painting of Christ, with the lepers, healing the lepers. He healed 10 lepers at one time, as a famous painting and scene. And the way the writer wrote it was magnificent. Here's another painting of Christ healing a leper. The lepers really had it bad. They were outcast from society. If people would see them in public, they would throw stones at them. The lepers were required to say, "Unclean, unclean," to announce that they had leprosy, which was contagious by touch. So this is his mother and his sister Tirzah, Mother Miriam, sister Tirzah, and they had had leprosy now for about 10 years before Ben-Hur finally was freed from the galley slaves, returned home, found them, and then they found Christ. In the way it was written in the book, it was magnificent. I can't even put it into words how magnificent it was written in the books. It was extraordinary, the whole process. So I'll give this guy Lew Wallace. He really was a brilliant man, and I think he is a great writer, and I think it took him 5 audio CDs of preparatory work to get to where he hit his stride. But once he hit his stride, the book was magnificent, and the movie, they had to condense the 20-hour book into a 3-hour movie, and they did a great job of it. So here is Christ on the Via Dolorosa, walking the path to Mount Golgotha for his crucifixion, carrying the cross on his shoulders after he'd been severely tortured and whipped. And Ben-Hur tried to help him, but they wouldn't let him. But he saw, in the movie, they saw Christ, on the Via Dolorosa, Miriam and Tirzah. But actually in the book, they saw him a little bit sooner, before that, on his way to Jerusalem, rather than in Jerusalem after the crucifix. So the movie had to do certain things to be able to get it all in the 3 hours. But the movie was extraordinary. It is a fantastic movie. And the book is still good, but you got to be doing it as an audiobook. I don't think any reasonable person nowadays that's so busy is going to go through 5 hours of boring stuff to get to the good stuff. Or you could just jump ahead to it if you knew where to go. Anyways, here is the crucifixion of Christ, and they're getting ready to crucify the 2 thieves, the good thief on the right, the bad thief on the left. So Ben-Hur attends the crucifixion. And what I'm going to tell you is Ben-Hur, I think, is a great book, but it's going to be hard to read it, like I just said. But the audiobook is fun. The movie's worth watching. You can get the movie if you search on the internet. What I've noticed is different video sites on the internet. And there's a bunch of different ones. The one whose initials start with the letter B as in boy and C as in car, that's the best one for finding old movies, okay? Because I've searched all of them for old movies. That's the best one. And that's where you will find this movie. So anyways, Quo Vadis, much better movie and book about Rome. Not much better, but better. Well, the movie of Quo Vadis was only, I would say, equivalent to Ben-Hur. But the book, Quo Vadis, was a masterpiece. It was a brilliant book, one of the all-time great books, top 5 books of all time. I'm just showing you this because it's more Roman-themed stuff, and that was in the time after the birth of Christ, and that after the death of Christ, and it was a time of Nero the Emperor, like around 64 A.D., and that was rather magnificent. And currently what I'm reading is Robert Harris, Imperium. Yeah, this guy, Robert Harris, he's one of these English guys, and I've seen him being interviewed, and when he's interviewed, he kind of strikes me as a typical British intellectual, superficial, kind of pompous, and I was about to say, screw this guy, I don't want to read anything by this guy, he's a boring, stick in the mud fart from England. But, and also you got to remember, I'm half Irish, so I have some indwelling resentment for the English and their pomposity. However, one of the viewers had read this book and told me it was magnificent. So I figured, all right, I'll give it a chance. And I've only read the first audio CD of it, but it was magnificent. It's great. I can't believe how good it is. So I'm going to give that a chance. I'm only bringing these up because they're more Roman stuff. So the bottom line with Ben-Hur is the movie, enjoy the movie. It's great. The book, you don't want to buy the book, but just so you know about it. So anyways, I hope this was interesting about Ben-Hur. I like to be well informed about the ancient Romans. I find them interesting. They're kind of like the ultimate in power on earth, man having unlimited absolute power and how he behaves in that situation. And of course, the magnificent contrast with the Christians who brought so much goodness into the world.